Welcome to the Power Forward Pod, hosted by the Power Forward Group Financial Advisory Team, where we believe 2 is better than 1. Dialogues are better than monologues. Thoughts are meant to be challenged. Sound boxes are the enemy, and change is the only constant. If you want to learn more about our day jobs, check us out at powerforwardgroup.com. It's nice to have the entire crew back together for today's podcast. On my left, we have Bobby Castlener. Bobby, how you
guys doing?
We're doing all right, I hope.
It's good to see everybody in person again, all of us together.
Chris's first time back in the office since what, Thanksgiving?
Yeah. Finally lost the weight. I was comfortable going back.
Had to get him in for this.
That's why you avoided the office?
Yeah.
Thanksgiving eating? Okay. All right. Sounds good. Bobby, any extravagant spends this month?
This month, I would say my most recent one is right here. So what we have here is a hydrogen water bottle. Very fancy, I know. Okay. Normal water is H2O. This is H3O. No, I'm just kidding. But all seriousness, I've been listening a lot to Gary Brecka lately. I don't know if you guys are familiar with him.
Is he paying you for that spot?
He is not, no.
Okay. We're going to work on that.
We will work on that, actually. He actually has his own podcast, The Ultimate Human.
He didn't pay you yet.
You guys should check it out, though. Anyways, he's a very, very big proponent on this. A lot of long-term health benefits, helps with like inflammation, anti-aging, antioxidants, you name it. This coped with taking cold showers is something I've been getting into lately too. He recommends that.
You do the ice bath also?
I don't. I'm going to, hopefully this summer. I'm trying to talk my dad into getting one for the shore house this summer. So hopefully we'll start doing that like once every morning. That'll be great. A lot of good benefits to it though.
It's definitely working. You feel the effects?
I don't know.
You can see it in Bobby's hair.
It's only been like 2 weeks. But,
I don't know. If you're on camera, you might be able to see the water bottle, but this water bottle turns blue when Bobby does his, there we go.
Check it out.
So,
get a nice close.
Would you like it as much if it didn't turn blue?
Maybe not. I don't know.
What are the bison colors?
Orange and blue.
All right, so we got some blue in there.
Some orange in there. Yeah. How about you, Ruben? Any splurges lately, or?
I think I avoided a splurge. I have 3 kids, as you guys know. My son Sam is 12. He has an iPhone that he's excited about. He loves to use it. Ton of screen time. Judah, who's 9, just got his iPad, so I guess that's an extravagant splurge. We took him actually from a Kindle to an iPad. The big difference is on the iPad, he can FaceTime his friends, so it adds a social factor.
Next thing is the Vision Pro.
That might be a real extravagant spend. I think that's, how much is that, $3,000 or something?
I think $3,500.
Yeah, so he's moving up. The one I avoided, though, is my daughter Serena sees Judah get his iPad, and she says, hey, it's my turn to get a screen. So I said, no problem. You can have Judah's hand-me-down Kindle. She goes, no, I want that iPad.
She's too smart for that.
Yeah, so I'm avoiding that spend for as long as I can, but I think she's probably going to get that iPad at an earlier age than the rest of them.
What do you do, just like walk into a different room when she comes in? Running away from your daughter?
Well, actually, you see my Microsoft Surface computer that I'm using here. So I placed that in front of her in lieu of her iPad for some screen time so she'd eat her dinner, and then she dropped it on the floor. And I said, uh-oh, we got problems.
Oh, my 2.5-year-old's better on my iPhone than I am. He goes into like FaceTime and he finds like all these emojis and things I didn't even know existed, and he knows how to put it on the screen.
Yeah, David and I talk all the time. He calls me. I don't understand what he's saying, but we talk all the time.
Wouldn't be surprised. I give him my phone. He even knows the password. He just pushes the buttons and gets on somehow.
Smart kid.
How about you, Chris? Any extravagant expenses?
Yeah, had to. Got an upgrade for my daughter's goldfish, so it was in like just one of those terrarium or whatever it's called bowls.
Terrarium.
Right, that's what it was.
So word of the day.
One of those round fish bowls, right?
Word of the day.
Didn't have a filter,
Sponsored by
right? So
Power
I
Forward
had to always dump it out and clean. So let me get a little fish tank with a filter. $400 later, we got another goldfish, a catfish, a frog, a couple SpongeBob things in there, and like 6 hours of YouTube. Videos of
so
learning how to
Thanksgiving,
clean a fish tank.
So from Thanksgiving till now, you now have an aquarium and a zoo in your home?
Yes. And I'm on Reddit chat boards talking about it.
So now we know why you have them in the office. Do your kids enjoy this?
My son, 1-year-old, he could climb up to it now, and he kind of just points at the fish.
Sounds dangerous.
No, he's good.
Okay. Does he eat the fish?
No.
Not yet. It's coming.
The first one we got for him didn't make it past the week.
Well, that's why you educated yourself.
Week's not bad. I got a goldfish and didn't make it through the night.
The first one we got, it's like 2 years old already. They can go to like 50 years old.
Did you get it like one of those fairs?
I don't know. It was a gift from daycare because they want us to take care of things at home, I guess.
How about you, Joe? Any extravagant expenses in the past month?
Yeah. I actually went for dinner on Valentine's Day. I don't know if that's super extravagant, but they definitely upcharge you for Valentine's Day, and that was not a pretty bill.
What was your bill?
Probably close to like $300.
Did you guys end dinner happy? Was it a nice event?
It was all right. Nothing $300 worth. It's just they want to call it Valentine's Day. They had $10 probably to every item, and they put a little heart, on it, and say, "Hey, Valentine's Day stuff."
Okay, so Bobby got hydrogen water, which I don't understand still, but apparently he's getting money under the table from some influencer. I got an iPad for my child and avoided another splurge that we'll probably work on soon. You got a zoo and aquarium in your house?
Aquarium.
So those all sound expensive. Joe, you went to dinner?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Susie Orman says no. You familiar with that at all?
Yeah, but she flies private, so I'll trade my dinners for private jets any day.
So what we're referring to is apparently, and we're going to talk a little bit today about different financial, I think I'll call them influencers rather than advisors, but financial personalities who have a lot to say about what people should do with their financial lives and as they build out their financial plans. So Susie Orman has a famous quote. What's her quote, Joe?
Yeah, I think it was an article in the Wall Street Journal. She said, "I don't go out for dinner because it's too expensive. She doesn't see any value in it, but she'll happily splurge on flying private." So
Joe broke Susie Orman's number one rule as a financial professional and went out for Valentine's dinner. But you enjoyed yourself.
Yeah.
So I think that's a lot of what we think about when we talk to our clients. Is like, what is a financial plan? A financial plan is building towards your goals, but it's also how are you going to enjoy life, right? Your finances, what you're working for. So I guess she enjoys flying private more than dinner. But
she also enjoys waking up at 4 a.m. I don't know the last time I woke up at 3:45 a.m. either.
Do they serve dinner on the plane?
I mean,
private, you got it.
It seems like a workaround.
Yeah.
I just flew overseas and
no snacks.
Dinner was not that great.
Yeah.
Dinner was not that great.
What airline?
We flew El Al. We flew to Israel, and
Okay.
dinner wasn't
Got to
even
fly.
spectacular.
Got to fly Air Susie.
Private. Okay, so I guess maybe that does make sense. Maybe Susie Orman's getting a package deal on her private flight, coming with an open wet bar, and there's probably some good food involved.
Maybe.
Next Valentine's Day?
Yeah, no.
No, that's not a good expense. Doesn't fit within the budget.
I'd love to fly private, but it's definitely not $300.
Right. So I think that's the point in a lot of ways. I think a lot of financial influencers, I think we'll call them, have these broad-based ideas. They have radio shows, TV shows, and they have massive audiences, and I think they're trying to provide financial, we'll call it education, literacy. And I think a lot of those ideas come from their backgrounds and come about from what they're thinking about. I think our role when we deal with clients is really to speak to clients and say, hey, what do you want out of life? What we said before, and what are your goals and what do you want your money to do for you? But since it's always fun, let's pick a little bit at some financial influencer ideas and see how they fit within what a lot of our clients like to do. I mean, the first thing I think about when we speak to our clients throughout the year, when we speak to our attorney clients, what do we hear over and over again? I think, what's the biggest expense we hear from all our clients all the time?
Food.
Uber Eats.
Uber.
Yeah, Uber too.
Yeah, eating out.
Right? Seamless, Uber Eats,
Yeah.
going out to eat, right? Because when you're working 8, 9, 10 hours a day, it's hard to come home and cook dinner. So that's not necessarily extravagant expense if it lets you do what you do, which is going to work every day, which is how you get paid and keeping your psyche so you don't burn out. So Chris, when we think about different financial influencers' views on things, and we build out financial plans, where do we start our financial plans when we deal with clients?
We would start with kind of the savings, right? Because I think that's what kind of leads everything, right? So we're sitting down with clients and figuring out, hey, what are their goals? What have you saved up for them? How are you kind of planning towards them? And figuring out that number, figuring out, hey, what percentage of income should be diverted to these different goals? A lot of these studies out there and a lot of these influencers kind of just push broad-based numbers, as you're saying, right? They'll say, hey, save 20%, 15%, whatever, because it's a good idea to do that versus not doing that, right?
And it's better to save than not save.
Right, exactly, right? But they don't take into account as the particular situation somebody's in. Maybe they don't need to save that much. Maybe they need to save more than that. And they don't take into account what they've already done, right? They're just telling you. It doesn't matter how old you are, or how young you are, what you have going on so far. It's just do this, right? Which might work out for you. But when we try to do it, we try to do it a little bit more, I'll call it customized and bespoke for clients and really sitting down and seeing it with their current situations. And I think the biggest thing, though, that I took away from kind of reading up on some of these articles and stuff like that, these studies, is that what they show is that the people that are most successful, let's just say you sit down with a client and say, hey, I got to save 20%. What if they can't, right? Do you just wait until you can and then start doing it, right? No, you start small, right? So we've definitely used that term of kind of turning on the faucet, right? Because what they've shown is that, people won't go from not saving to all of a sudden becoming super savers because they can do it all of a sudden. It's all like going to the gym, right? You don't go to the gym and throw 4 plates on the barbell, right? You got to build up to that, right? So we try to really do that with clients, whether they're making $1 million or $100,000 a year. Is start small and build that up over time because you get behind it, right? Was another interesting thing I saw, and I actually do this for myself. I never really thought about how other people do it effectively is like almost separating accounts for different goals, right? So like for me, like my wife and I are saving up for a house. We have an account that specifically says down payment, right? I have an account that says emergency fund, an account that says, for taxes, for investing, whatever that goal is, accounts for the kids, stuff like that. And separating it just like that actually promotes people saving more.
Where did the aquarium come from? Which account?
That was the one that just general savings.
General savings.
Now I used to save for the pet insurance, so I keep buying more goldfish every week.
No, if you strategically have them die within a month, they replace them. So, I just always keep a dead one on hand.
I think we're going to have problems with certain animal rights groups. I worry about your...
I'm joking, Peter. But anyway. That was the big one. Because the goal is to try to, like, the term or phrase, I'll say the coin term is, pay yourself first, right?
Right.
It's like, all right, you got to do all these things, you got these obligations, but pay yourself first, because you're never going to be doing the wrong thing by putting money aside for yourself, whether it's small or a large amount.
I think it's interesting also, we start the conversation when we're building a financial plan with savings rate. We don't start with budget. Why is that? Why do you think that is?
I think because it's hard to just budget yourself. And I guess I was talking to a client the other day about this. I don't think you can really budget yourself. I think most people can't, I should say. The way that I always try to do it is like set aside what you need to set aside for whatever you want to save for, and then you kind of have the permission to spend the rest, right? The way to kind of do it that way. The conversation I was actually having with a client, and Jamie Dimon, this is an idea for you if you're listening to the podcast, which I'm sure you are, is that he was actually in a spot where he can save a lot, but he wasn't for whatever reason, and he was telling me that he was paying off his credit cards before the statement was due. Right, so he'd run up a balance, maybe he had 3 more weeks to pay it, he'd pay it off in chunk. And I've been guilty of doing that, and I say guilty of doing that because I think what happens to me myself is if I go and do that, I now think, oh, look, I have some money to spend. Like my credit card bill's not that high. I could go out and buy a fish tank for more fish.
But your bank account value is lower. It's just moving money from one.
Yeah, but I think when you're looking at specifically at the credit card, like you're looking at, hey, here's my run up for the month. That's where it's at. And when you see it's lower, you're okay with it, like building back up again.
Don't get Joe started on credit cards. We did a whole podcast on credit cards, so I think
well, no, it depends on what you're thinking about. Do you look at your credit card and say, here's how much I owe my credit card? Or do you look at your bank account and say, hey, here's how much is in my bank account?
I don't look at the bank account at all. No, I'm saying I specifically just look at the credit card and like, hey, that's how much is on the credit card bill.
I look at it the other way. I look at how much is my bank account, and if I feel like I have more in there, even if my credit card's higher, then I would come to spend more.
So I think that's the point itself, right? I don't think one is right or one is wrong. I think Joe's focused on his credit card points, as we did a couple of weeks ago, and Chris is focused on what his goals are and the way he thinks about his finances. So when we set those goals, right, we set those goals with clients. And we don't set the goal. They set the goal. We set the rate, right? That's, I think, the first and foremost thing, right? We ask clients what their goals are, and then we set towards those goals. The second question, which we've discussed a little bit in the past, is how do we allocate towards those goals? And when we think about financial influencers, they give a lot of ideas. I think a lot of those ideas are based on just broad-based concepts. There was actually an interesting study that we looked at that took financial influencers and it analyzed their advice versus the advice an economist would give in the same situation. And maybe surprisingly, maybe unsurprisingly, those two were diverted from each other oftentimes. They were not the same. Financial influencers were not giving the same advice as economists would recommend. But I do think there's a reason for that, right? I think they're trying to get people to make changes. There's a reason behind that. When we think about the advice that financial influencers give from an allocation standpoint towards those goals, like how do we think about that, Bobby?
Yeah. Well, I think one thing they would agree on, common advice and just economists here, was that time horizon matters. And I think that's one of the most important questions you have to ask, right? Chris just mentioned all of these, he's got a lot of sub accounts for different goals, right? You have to take a look at what the time horizon is. And I think common belief is that stocks or equities, right, they'll become less risky as your holding period increases, right? So the longer duration, of time until you actually need to access this money, the more quote unquote aggressive you can be, right? And for the sake of this conversation, right, we'll stick with just stocks or equities, bonds, and cash, right? And I think the study, really took a look at all three of those things. And common belief is that, and common practice is for goals that are coming up in the short term, right? Maybe a year, 2 years from now, you want to be held in more conservative investments, right? You may want to look to be more heavily allocated towards fixed income assets, right? That have a safer, lower volatility. You're going to get a lesser rate of return, but the volatility is the key factor there, right? You want to hold more money in cash. There's a chart here I want to show, and I think Michaela will be able to put this up on the website here. This just shows you kind of stocks, bonds, and cash, annual returns from 1928 to 2023. And I think with no surprise here, everybody here knows, most people listening will probably understand, right? Stocks are going to be your best rate of return long term. But with that comes more volatility. So it shows the chart we're looking at here shows the maximum they had in one given year, the lowest return they've had, and the average, right? So stocks, by no surprise, I think we all know this, right? They'll average right around 10%. I think it's 9.8% here, and the metric we're using is the S&P 500. Do you guys know what the best year ever was?
In the S&P 500?
Yeah.
It's going to be following a down year.
Probably like 48, 45.
2021?
So I don't have
percentage.
So I don't have the exact year. This is with dividends included, but we're looking at 52.6%.
What year?
I'll have to look that up, but I'm pretty sure it's got to be right after the Great Depression. That's my guess.
Okay, we're going to have to come back to that.
We'll come back to that.
We'll notate that.
The worst year, you guys want to take a guess? For worst year for the S&P 500?
I mean, it's going to be
Down
around
just in terms of
probably
percentage.
Down 45 or something like that.
Close, yeah. So 44% almost. Bonds, right? You're averaging, and this is the 10-year treasury, you're looking at around 4.5%. Best year ever was 32%. Worst year ever was 17.8%. So you can see the volatility isn't nearly as wide as stocks. And then cash, you're looking at anywhere from 10% as its best year. 3.3 is kind of the average. And 0% is kind of the lowest, right? You're never going to get a negative rate of return on cash unless you're including inflation there. But
what are they saying is the return on cash? Or something like just an interest rate at a bank?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. So I think the point there is, right, in terms of allocation, you want to look at what your holding period is, right? For longer term accounts, right, your 401k, right? You can make an argument you want to be much more heavily invested in equities and shorter duration, right? Maybe shift it to the other end of the spectrum, right? Be more allocated towards bonds and fixed income and cash alternatives.
So it's similar to the podcast we had a couple of weeks back where we discussed sometimes not just autopiloting your accounts, not being the way to go, but being a little bit more individualized about your decisions and our decisions from a timeline perspective and from a goal perspective. So Bobby's always bringing the data. I think that's why he's drinking water. That's going to let him live forever, apparently.
There we go.
Question the data on that, but we'll find out.
I'll send you the studies.
Right. As an addendum to this podcast as well. Bobby's not getting paid for that. So we have the savings rate together. We have the idea of having an individualized approach to how to allocate those portfolios. A lot of what we're hearing today in the marketplace when we speak to clients is kind of clients have certain goals. A lot of times we're hearing about housing, we're hearing about things like that, big expenses that are coming up that we think about as expenses, but they're life goals, right? Buying a home for a lot of clients is a goal that's before retirement. It comes earlier. And as the interest rate environment has gone up and up and up, it's become a harder environment sometimes to make those purchases. There's an article in the Wall Street Journal on Sunday titled, "Dave Ramsey Tells Millions What to Do with Their Money. People under 40 say he's wrong." It's a pretty aggressive quote, but I think a lot of what they're talking about, Dave Ramsey talks about debt a lot from his own experience, but I think a lot of what they're talking about is how much debt you can take to achieve your goals and where that fits in life cycle-wise. So Joe, the credit card king who knows how to manage that, what are your thoughts on those approaches to debt?
Yeah, well, credit card debt is definitely not a good thing, like we said on that podcast, and especially in the high interest rates that they have now. But I think Dave Ramsey, just from his background, is very anti-debt. I think even just on mortgages, which I think people would say is a good debt, right? Owning a house, sort of the American dream. It's built on owning a house. And he says, don't do 30-year fixed mortgages, which is, I'd say, the standard. He says do 15-year fixed mortgages. And, I don't know about...
What's generally the difference between a 15-year and a 30-year?
So either paying it off over 30 years or 15 years, I'd say you're probably doubling your cost of just owning that house. And housing prices today are at probably like all-time highs, I believe. I think they came out, like they said, December was like all-time highs for housing prices. So if it's already hard to buy a house, now imagine doubling the cost of owning a house.
Market's still tough. Yeah, we're in the process of looking. I think Chris is too, but market's...
Right, it's not just the housing prices, it's also the rate you're paying the bank, right?
Mm-hmm.
Interest rate, and then, yeah, exactly. So now you're saying, hey, I could afford a $4,000 house, a month house, but, Dave Ramsey says get 15-year fixed, now turn that into a $7,000 that it's going to cut your house value in half.
So there's clearly math involved in that, but I think our job is to listen to clients and say how heavy, like you weight those goals, right? We don't weight the goal. It's not my job. It's not Dave Ramsey's job to weight the goal.
100%. And
it's your job to weight the goal.
If you take the mathematical side of it and said, if I'm going to get a 15-year mortgage compared to a 30-year mortgage, right? And Chris was touching on this earlier. Let's say you take the difference and invest it over that 30 years, whatever that difference would be between getting the 15-year and the 30-year, you'll end up with more money investing it over 30 years compared to waiting 15 years to invest the full amount that 15-year would be. So you're actually leaving a lot of money on the table by getting that 15-year mortgage. Now, obviously, everything's all about emotional when Dave Ramsey's talking because he had a bad debt story. But from a mathematical standpoint, it definitely makes more sense to invest the difference. And I think even like when it comes to credit card debts and student loan debt, the same thing would apply there, right? I'm sure he would say, don't have any student loan debt. I know I heard a clip from him where someone called in and said, hey, should I pay down my student loans? And he went on a rampage saying, don't listen to your advisor. Yes, you shouldn't have any debt, even though their rate was pretty low on the student loans.
At the same time, like I think he does have an interesting approach that I've heard before about the way to handle debt. I think the math, it's not really definitely math-based. It's more about psychological-based, right? Chris, we discussed this before, right? What's his approach on debt?
So it's the snowball effect, right? Of like if you have, let's say you have 3 or 4 different loans, different interest rates, pay off the smallest one, even if that one might have a lower interest rate than some of the bigger loans, right? Just because you want to get a win, right? So if you do that consistently, I think there is something to that, like, right? Like we talk about like saving with clients, like, hey, if you can't save 20%, don't wait till you can. Do a little bit because that's a win, right? You kind of build up those wins over time, and it snowballs. That's why it's called that.
Yeah. Well, when he talks about that, I think he's generalizing to the mass that have credit card debt, right? So you're talking to someone who can't necessarily be saving because they're just worrying about paying down debt. So from his perspective, it's how do I make sure that these people who got themselves into a position where they have debt, they need to pay it down as fast as possible. What's the way to get them to do it? Like Chris, you're saying, right? Same thing on the saving side. Just start. How do you start? By paying down the small ones. Then as they get build up, you'll end up saving more. So I think he's taking what we're saying on the saving side and applying it to debt. So he's taking out the mathematical side of paying the high interest down, but at least getting them to start is worth a lot.
So there he's taking a psychological analysis. Yeah. It's interesting because you said he has got a money story, right? You mentioned something about him having that scenario in the past that affected him, and he's bringing that money story into the way he thinks about things. At the same time, he takes a psychological approach to the way to pay down debt. I think every plan we have, right, every client we have has different goals, and I think our job is to listen to their goals and the way they're thinking about things. Dave Ramsey is in a position where he's talking to a bunch of people. Susie Orman's on MSNBC or CNBC. She's talking to tons of people at one time. She doesn't know the individual side. She's not hearing from the individual necessarily. She's just trying to create advice amongst a group. It says it in the title, right? Dave Ramsey tells millions what to do with their money. People under 40 say he's wrong. When we speak to people, I don't think we tell them. I think we listen to them, and then we advise. And I think Susie Orman and Dave Ramsey would agree. Dave Ramsey has a whole business that's built on this. He recommends that clients do meet with individual financial advisors. He takes a referral cut, of course, because why would he not get paid the same way Bobby?
He's getting on his hydrogen.
Well, apparently Bobby's not getting paid.
I got to get paid for
Dave
that.
Ramsey way smarter.
I gotta work on this.
But he's getting paid. He's making sure his listeners do get bespoke, individualized financial advice. And I think that's something everybody deserves, because I think if we don't think along those lines, it's really hard to build out your own financial plan. I think even sitting around this table, right, we all have different views of the ways we think about things. Chris, we discussed savings rate before. Bobby, you discussed investment allocation. Joe, you discussed debt. There's advice, but there's no hard and fast rule. Along all those lines, right, we keep some money in the bank on the sidelines all the time. We keep a safety net. Bobby, when you think about a safety net, like what's the right safety net? What's your safety net?
Yeah. So I'd say now it's on a typical month, it's usually between like 4 and 6 months. I think we're holding a little bit more.
4 and 6 months of what?
4 to 6 months of expenses.
Well, I'm not going to ask you about your expenses because you buy hydrogen water.
Do not ask me my expenses. Yeah. I think lately it's been a little bit higher just because we were actively looking for a house towards the end of last year. I think we're putting that on pause right now.
Your expenses were higher when you were looking for a home? I think you're supposed to go the other direction.
No, savings were a little bit higher just because,
Bobby's following Dave Ramsey. He's going for the 15-year mortgage. So there you go.
I don't know about that, but yeah. So right, we had a near-term house goal come up, which we still might be looking towards the end of this year. So I think we're a little bit heavy in cash and
with the goal in mind.
With the goal in mind, exactly. Right. But normally, I would say anywhere from 4 to 6 months of expenses is our number. But everybody's different, right?
How about you,
Chris?
Chris?
What about you guys?
I keep at least 6 months of expenses in Tesla leap calls at all times. Yeah.
That's not advice for clients at home.
25K. 25K is the number.
Which is what? What does that mean? 25.
Just
why?
Sounds good.
Feels right.
Yeah, looks good. I like the number 5. And I don't want to keep.
It's definitely Jewish significance to 5. 5 times 5. Yeah, 100%.
Okay, so Joe, speak.
boy.
Like there's every number has a Jewish significance.
Joe's got significance everything.
555.
What about you, Joe?
I'm probably more conservative than both of you guys. I'm more like 9 or 12 months, I'd say. I don't have an exact number. Or just like it fluctuates over time. But I like to see cash.
I like to see cash on hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, you would.
You like to sleep? You like to sleep with your cash, Joe?
Oh, 100%.
Under his pillows. You gotta see what David gets from the Tooth Fairy. There's a lot of cash moving around that house.
There's always
Ruben,
money.
what's
There's
your
always
number?
money in the banana stand.
How about you, Ruben?
The number we use is 36, and the reason is it's an emotionally significant number to my wife, who and she.
So also going for the Jewish significance there. You and Chris. All right.
Chris is going for the Jewish significance.
Yeah.
I'm
555.
So I'm told.
Right. So 18 equals chai, which is life. So it's seen as kind of a good number. 18 is enough. $18 is definitely enough. $18,000 definitely doesn't seem to be enough. So we just double it, call it 36, and that keeps us happy. But what are we trying to solve for there? We're trying to solve for the idea that sometimes the market will drop, right? Bobby gave us the metrics before. It can drop by some significant points. I don't want to react when it drops. You don't want to react when it drops. You don't want to change your situation. You want your plan to have that planned out. So we all have different numbers. There's no hard and fast rule. And I think, that's the idea. Everybody has an individualized plan based on their goals, based on the way they psychologically think about money. So Susie Orman, Dave Ramsey, everybody else provide a value? I think so.
I do.
Yep.
Bobby?
Yep.
Joe?
Yeah.
But I think you got to get a little bit more individualized in that. So, and be true to yourself, right? Know who you are and know what fits within your plan and make sure your advisor's listening to you first.
That's the goal.
Glad to spend time with all you guys and look forward to the next podcast.